Okay, let's get our homework out from yesterday. And before we do the graphing calculator ones, which I do have graphing calculators here for you, I want to look at 42 just because I want to remind you that sometimes these numbers can get really, really big. You're going to have a worksheet today with some graphs on it, and I did not label the x and y axis. I think the x-axis can go by ones, but I do want to say that on the y-axis, you're going to have to make it go by something other than ones on most of the problems. So don't label your x and y axis until you find your points, because these graphs can get a kind of really big, which 42 I think turns out to be like that. Again, I hope that you're trying these. I cannot stress enough how much you have to be doing homework in this class if you want to be successful. And on this, you could at least go through and say all the stuff, and then when you start picking points, you might have stopped because you thought there's no way that this could be right, but I think it is. So when I look at this, looking at this, if I work this out, that would be x squared. Looking at this, if I work this out, it would be x to the fourth. If I multiplied all of that plus the 7 in the front, because that would be multiplied through at some point, if that was a negative, really important that you pay attention to the leading sign. But if you multiplied 7 times x squared times x to the fourth, our leading term would be 7x to the sixth, which means that's a sixth degree polynomial, and the coefficient's positive, it's even, you got to know these rules, which means they're both going to be pointing in the same direction, and because it's positive, they're both going to be pointing up. I can also say I know I have a 0 at 3 and at -5, and they both have a multiplicity. This one has a multiplicity of 2. This one has a multiplicity of 4, which means since they're both even, then it's going to have, both of these are just going to touch. Which means if I make a graph here, and again, this is kind of what it looks like on your homework today, is you have just some blank lines here that you can fill in depending on what they are. So I'm not going to label my y-axis yet, but let's label what we know on the x-axis of we have a 0 at 3, we have a 0 at -5, and I know both arrows point up, which means this graph is going to all be above the x-axis. There's going to be no point that it's below the x-axis. But what we do need is to pick some points here, and I'm going to grab a calculator. And if I grab a calculator and I pick a few points here, my first point I'm going to pick is 0, but it is still a really big number when I plug 0 in here, because I'm going to get 7 times 9 times 5 to the fourth, goodness gracious, is going to be 39,375 is the y value on that. That's pretty tall, right? What if we pick right next to each 0 and kind of see how quickly that's going up? So what if we pick -4? And again, I'm just going to do this all on my calculator. I would highly recommend that you practice typing stuff in on your calculator. -4, that's going to be terrible. Okay, squared times 4 plus 5 to the fourth. Okay, that's 343. What if I picked 2 on the other side of the other 0? If I plug 2 in there, I'm going to get 16,807, which means I think the best option here is let's make our y-axis go by 10,000. Maybe we could do 5,000, but that's okay. I'm just going to say this is 10,000, which would make this 40,000. I don't think there's any on your homework that are as terrible as this, but I just wanted to show you that this is kind of the idea that I want you to do on the homework today. So at 0, it's at close to 40,000. At -4, it's at 343, which means if I'm going by 10,000, then that's really not going to be very high at all off my graph there. And at 2, it's at 16,000, which would be a little more than halfway up here, right? Let's say like right here. And I'm just going to kind of wing it from here. Obviously, I could pick some more points, but I'm just going to go with it. But I do want you to be aware that this one over here has a multiplicity of 4. So when I graph this, although I know it points up, I'm going to show that it flattens out here pretty well based on what we talked about yesterday. And again, I'm kind of being very vague in this part of the graph because I don't really know how fast it's going up, but I'm just going to say that it goes up something like that. And it comes back down, and over here at 3, it has a multiplicity of 2, which means it's also going to kind of flatten out, but not as flat as the other side. But the labeling of your x and y axis is very important because these can get to be very strange numbers. But what I really want to look at are those 3 that I wanted you to graph on the graphing calculator. Ugh, I can't speak. 45, 48, and 51. 45 says graph the function in a viewing window that shows all of its x-intercepts and approximates all of its zeros. So 45 f of x equals x cubed plus 2x squared minus 4x minus 7. And so you need to get a graphing calculator. I've left a box of them with the sub, and so now would be a good time to get one. I'm going to pull my graphing calculator up and go ahead and graph mine. So as I'm doing that and you're getting your calculators, you can type the same thing in your calculators and kind of follow along with me on this one, because then I'm going to have you do the other 2 by yourself, okay? So if you have your calculator, you can type this in. Remember where the X button is. Remember you can use the caret button to do your powers. The caret button's right above the division sign. But you should be able to get x cubed plus 2x squared minus 4x minus 7 in there. If I'm way far ahead of people and you don't have calculators passed out yet, go ahead and pause this for a second until everyone gets situated. The directions on this say approximate all its zeros. I want you to actually find the zeros because it's just good practice to get as close as you can and learn how to find these. The window, we want the window to be the same for everyone, at least to begin with. So if you go to zoom number 3, if you go to standard number 6, remember that that's going to give you like your normal like 10 by 10 viewing window. And I can see from this graph that it looks like there's 3 zeros. If you make a graph of one of these and you don't think all your zeros are shown in it, maybe your in behavior isn't matching what it should, you might need to go change your window. So just very quickly here before we get too far into this, window right here next to y equals, remember you can change your x and your y axis. So if you think you don't have enough information shown, you can make your x-axis or y-axis go a bigger amount, more than -10 to 10. This one, there's plenty of room, so just to practice doing this, I'm going to go from -5 to 5. You have to go minimum as the lowest value, maximum as the highest value. And I just want to show you that it just kind of zooms in on your graph. We've also talked about we can use the zoom button on this. Same graph, I've just zoomed in to -5 to 5. This one does say approximate, which means we could get pretty close here. Just using these arrows here, I could scroll over and I could get pretty close and guess what the zero is. But I want you to actually find the zero by calculating it. So I'm going to go through this again with you, and feel free to help each other as you're doing this, just to kind of practice doing it. But calc, so you have to hit second trace, which is this button right here. And if you hit second trace, it comes up and it has you find a bunch of stuff. We want to find the zeros, the solution. So I'm either going to scroll down to number 2 here, or I'm just going to hit number 2. So second trace, and then you're going to do number 2, which is 0. And then it's going to ask you the left and the right bound. It asks you this because your calculator can only give you 1 0 at a time. So you have to tell it from what x value to what x value do you want it to find the 0. And if you include 2 zeros in that bounds, it's going to give you an error message. So it's important that you do the right way. Mine started right here at the center. I'm going to go all the way to the leftmost 0. So I need to go to the left of it to say, hey, the 0 is... This is the left bound of the 0. It doesn't matter how far left you go, as long as you go to the left of that 0. So see where my cursor is? My 0's right here, so I went to the left of it. And I'm going to hit enter. Now don't hit enter too many times or you're going to get an error message. Hit enter only once. And then it says the right bound, which means go to the right of it. But be careful, because these are very close together, these zeros. I need to go to the right of it, but not so right that I get to the next 0. It might be helpful on this one if you just kind of pay attention and write down the steps, because you might be pushing buttons and miss something important here. But second 0, so you're going to do left bound, go to the left of it, and hit enter. And then we're going to do the right bound, go to the right of it, and hit enter again. And so I went to the right of it, and I'm going to hit enter. And then now it's going to ask you for the guess. The guess is exactly what it sounds like. Get close to it. So I'm going to go back over here a little bit, and I'm going to say, that looks pretty close. And I'm going to hit enter again. If you've done this correctly, it should give you the 0. If you get an error message, read the error message. If it says bound error, that means you didn't do the bounds right. If it says more than 1 0 included, it means you didn't do the bounds right. Usually that's the mistake. So I'm going to hit enter again, and I get that this 0, and I think part of the reason it says approximate is that it's a 0 it's not rational. So I would just say let's round to 2 decimal places, that this graph has a 0 at negative 2.47. There are 2 more zeros on this graph. I also need to find this 0, which means I have to do this process all over again. I'm going to hit second trace. I'm going to hit 0. I'm going to go to the left of it, but not so left that I get to the other 0. And then I'm going to go to the right of it, and then I'm going to guess. So make sure you read what it's asking. Pay attention to where your cursor is. Let me do this one, and then I'll be quiet for a minute and see maybe if you can do the third one. So I'm going to hit second calc. I'm going to hit number 2. And again, I'm going to the left of it. Doesn't always mean above it. It doesn't always mean below it. It depends on how the graph looks. But to the left means to the left of this dot. And to the left of this dot, I've made a mark right there. And then I need to go to the right of it, which means go past it. You can go as far as you want as long as you don't go to the next 0, but there's no need to go super far as long as you're past it. Hit enter again. And then it's going to ask me to guess. What I like about these calculators is it tells me what to do, right? The thing at the bottom tells me to guess. So I'm going to guess, and I get that that is a 0 at about negative 1.46. And there's one more 0 that I can see. It looks to me like that 0 is exactly at 2, but I could be wrong. It could be like 1.98, and I probably couldn't tell. So we have to do it again. So I'm going to be quiet for like a minute. I know that's hard to believe. Hit a few buttons, kind of see where you are. Help each other. If you're getting error message, ask the people next to you if they're getting it right to maybe look at yours. Okay, Okay, so I hit second trace already again. I hit number 2, and I kind of used my cursor already to get pretty close to it. But again, to the left of it, look at where your 0 is and go to the left on the x-axis, which in this case would be below it on this one. And then to the right of it means to go past it. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to guess. Oh, I went way too far. Oh, see, look, I was off a little bit. It says 1.94. Notice the y value on this is really, really small. Sometimes that happens. So I'm going to say 1.94 as my other one. That's the idea of how we can graph using graphing calculators, how we can find the zeros using graphing calculators. I've also assigned you to do 48 and 51. 48 is a big one. Change your window if you need to. And then 51, I think your zeros should be nice numbers on that. But again, I will give you the hint that your window is going to need to be a little bigger. Like make your window from negative 15 to 15 on the x-axis on 51. And this should take maybe like 10 or 15 minutes. As you get finished with 48 and 51, you can turn your graphing calculator back in to the sub or into the box or wherever it happens to be. And when you turn your calculator back in, you will get the worksheet that is homework tonight, which is four graphing problems, but you have to answer lots of things about the end behavior and the zeros and the multiplicity. Make good graphs on those. You should not be using your graphing calculator on these questions. You should be graphing them by hand. I should be seeing an XY chart. I should be seeing all that work to do those. So you have to turn your graphing calculator in before you can get the worksheet, and then you can work on the worksheet after that. Okay? Don't forget that tomorrow we're taking the AccuPlacer. So come in ready to take that test, and you'll have IDs, and Mr. Pruitt should be in here to help you get started on it. But that's the plan for tomorrow, and you'll also turn these worksheets in that you're going to get for homework. Okay, so graphing calculators first, turn in your graphing calculator, then get a worksheet.